Hi guys, it's Nicolette. So today I want to speak specifically to young people, and I call them millennials, and I don't even know what the word actually means. But obviously it's a certain group of people. They are generation whatever, and these are people that are very different from our parents. So people like me, people like you who's out there watching this video, because already you are in a digital space, which means that you probably are a millennial. And let's talk a little bit about the future going forward in terms of your money management. So let's pretend that you have just completed your degree and you're waiting for results currently, but you've already started feeling out for jobs, or you've already got a job for offer. You're one of the lucky people that a company, probably a great company, has already put a job offer on the table for you. So what is it that you should be looking out for when you now go out into the world and you're trying to, take your first steps in terms of just making sure that your money issues are in order, or your money management is in order? The first thing I always say to people is that you need to economize. You need to understand what it is that you are going to be doing with your money. So getting your first salary is very, very tempting. Everybody, when they get their first salary, they are tempted to do amazing things. You feel like Superman, you feel like Batman, you feel like Spider-Man, and you want to do all these amazing things. Number one, for your family, because your parents took care of you, or mama zala, or your grandmother was the one who was taking care of you. Your mom was selling things on the side of the street for you to be able to go to school. And granted, it's okay for you to go out there and want to be able to show some sort of appreciation and gratitude to your parents. But it's very, very important not to get tempted to take up any more new debt, because that's going to be the one thing that really is going to determine whether or not you start your money management journey on the correct footing or not. Now, obviously, a lot of us, we know when we leave university, some of us do leave with debt already, because that Red Square shop that has many shops, that brand obviously allows us to open accounts without any sort of proof of income. So some of us might be leaving university with quite a lot of debt. And the other one is gym membership. While gym membership is not necessarily an NCR kind of regulated debt, because there isn't actual money or credit that they're offering to you, you have created or have signed yourself up for a commitment to say, this is a contract that I'm binding myself to, and it's supposed to be prepaid use, but it really isn't done that way. And we obviously know the issues of South Africa, and in terms of NSFL, the whole continent, in terms of contracts and how they work. So if you are finding yourself in a situation where you've got a gym membership that you did not honor, and now you're stuck paying for a gym that you actually didn't even use, or you're not using purely because you signed yourself up for a contract, it's very important that you do not acquire any more debt now going forward. Learn to manage that debt that you've got and plan. I always say the most important thing for millennials and young people when it comes to money management is really to plan. And if you stick to the plan, it's important to know that once you stick to the plan, nothing should actually deviate you or deter you from sticking to the plan. And when we talk about plan, we're talking a little bit about your financial plan plus your budget. The thing is, most people, what they do is that they make their budget too stringent and too tight and too restrictive, that it gets to a point where they can no longer follow that budget. So it's important that as a young person, you understand who you are. Don't be in a rush to buy a property, because we all talk about how property is so important, and you need to get a property. If you are not in the right space, there is absolutely no need for you to go out there looking for a property. The second thing that you don't need to be looking out for or buying, if you do not need it, is a car. Don't be acquiring any long-term type of debt if you do not need it. If the job that you are at does not require you to be traveling, which most jobs, especially if it's entry level, depending obviously on the industry, don't require new people, the newcomer or the new interns, to be overly exposed to moving around in movements. Try not to find yourself in a situation where you are forced to buy a car unnecessarily. And if you've got a group of friends, I always say some of my young people that I speak to are like in the CA field, or they are lawyers and they live in the same area. Go at a pooling or carpooling, something like that. You don't have to buy a car. It is important to understand that a car is not a status. A car does not assert you as a person. A car does not validate you. But if you need a car, it is important that you also get yourself a car. But when we say if you need a car, we say get the car that is going to move you from A to B. You are 21, 22, 23 years old. You do not need to be driving an old Madala Mercedes-Benz. It's not important. You don't need to be driving a BMW. Of course, unless you can afford it, then by all means do so. But I always say, even if you can afford it, rather take that money that you can use and put it away in investment, because that's the other thing that's going to be very important. Is when you start saving and when do you start investing as a young person, because that is going to differentiate you between you who is saving and investing and the friends that are not doing so, the friends that are investing in parties, the friends that are investing in going to the nicest clubs, the friends that are buying bottles at the clubs. That's what's really going to differentiate you, and it's just a bit of a discipline that you need. Remember that the most important thing about savings and investment is the little thing we call compound interest. And compound interest, the one ingredient it definitely needs is an ingredient called time. You will never be able to capitalize on compound interest if you don't give your investments and your savings enough time. Start getting in the culture of an emergency fund. Guys, it's absolutely important to have an emergency fund, whether you are running a business or you're running your own personal life. I always say, try run your life as like a business. I know that it's impersonal and it doesn't really always work out, but try by all means. And I'll give you an example. Last week, one of my tenants calls me and she says, Nicolette, the toilet is leaking. And the thing is, I'm her landlord, so I have to go out there and fix the toilet. Now, I get there, I call a plumber, so there's a call out fee, and then the plumber literally says to me, you need to change the whole toilet mechanism, and that is costing me close to 1,900. If I didn't have an emergency fund, it would take such strain for me to be able to pay for those kind of things. So it's important that when you are a young person, get yourself in the culture of having an emergency fund as quickly as possible, so that you don't find yourself in these tricky situations. Because let me tell you what's going to happen when you start earning some money. All the relatives that think they contributed, and we're talking about the ones that think. We're not really talking about your mom, your dad, who really did contribute, your aunt, your grandfather, that really did contribute to your education. They're going to come out of the woodworks, because now all of a sudden, Spanbani is working and Spanbani's got a good job. So you know what, we can rely on them financially. So it's very important that you also account for such things as black tax. Guys, black tax should not be springing up on us. It is very, very special occasions where black tax really does spring on you. But in actual fact, if you know that your family is of a certain standard, or your family is suffering financially in certain areas, then you can assist. You definitely can assist. And I always say, plan for your black tax. Don't let it become something that becomes a challenge for you, something that sits on your shoulders and weighs you down because you actually did not budget for it. So it's very important that you also take that into account. Don't have these costs that spring up on you. It's very important that you do not take up any new debt. The other thing that you need to please do is start building good credit, a good credit record, because at some point you're going to want to get a home loan, you might want to get a business loan, you might want to get a car on a vehicle loan. So it's important that you start building your credit record and making sure that it is solid. Now, credit record, guys, is really easy. It gets built on whether or not you pay as you promise to pay. So if you go out there and get a clothing account, make sure that you pay the clothing account as you have promised, even if you make additional payments, but make sure that you stick to the payment schedule as per the contract and as per your agreement with your creditor, because that is going to show the creditors or future people that are going to be advancing any type of loan to you that you are a good creditor. And it might sound a little bit backwards for us to, promote good credit history and good credit worthiness. But the reality is that it is almost impossible for somebody who's starting out not to be going out there and looking for some sort of home loan, some sort of business loan. So it's very important that when you do need the money, be able to be in a position where you are able to get it, and you get it at a good interest rate. Because sometimes our credit records are so bad that the banks think, okay, let's give this person a little bit of a loan, but they give it to you at a very expensive rate. So it's very important that you make sure that you keep your credit record as clean and as good as possible. The other thing I always say is, guys, financial literacy. I cannot stress it more than any. Financial literacy is very important. Financial literacy is the difference between you knowing how much you get charged for interest versus you just taking up an overdraft, you taking up an unsecured personal loan, not knowing how much it's actually going to cost you for that specific loan. It's you buying a car using a personal loan versus a vehicle loan because you actually do not understand how these things work. So it's very important that financial education is something that you prioritize at base. It does not mean that you now need to go and attend classes. But look, If classes are going to help, you best attend those classes. But get into a culture of getting information, getting in the know. Create the advantage of knowing for yourself. I know that we don't like reading. I know that we don't like information. Sometimes when somebody asks you, it's better to be ignorant. You ask especially as black people, you ask a black person something and they're just like, I don't know that. And they don't care and they go away and they just never know. So it's important that you as a person, you start taking those steps in advancing your financial education, advancing your financial literacy, so you don't find yourself taking up group schemes and thinking you've taken up an investment. So you don't come back and ask Nicolette, what is an education policy? Because an education policy it's not a thing. It doesn't exist, that thing, guys. An education policy is really just a nickname for an investment. So it is very important to say, you know what? You as a new person, you still have the opportunity. Oh, fine, Inati. You don't like us who didn't have the advantage of knowing, who had to play catch up. You are still going into the job market. You're going into the salary market. You're going into the I'm now about to earn money market. So you've got an opportunity for you to advance your financial literacy. This is going to be very important. And last, so that I don't blow up your mind, guys, start talking about money. Start talking about money in your relationship. Start talking about money amongst your friends. Start talking about money in your family. It is going to be very important for you to start making money a normal conversation to have, so that if you do experience certain things that you are not sure of, there is somebody for you to ask, and you've got an open communication channel between you and somebody else that you can ask about financial issues. Because sometimes all it takes is one person to really explain these things to you, and then you understand it. Sometimes you can't read it in a book. Sometimes you can't listen to the likes of the guys that are on these big commercial radio stations, that come on these big television stations to try and explain financial terms, because they are really technical. They're not just technical, but sometimes they talk jargon and they use these big words and they talk about gearing and all sorts of things. And I'm just sitting there like, listen, guys, please, can you simplify these things for us? Because really, these should be normal conversation. The same way you talk about, over the weekend, talk about money. Talk about how do we save money? How do we make money? How do we keep money? Because I always punt this saying by Robert Kiyosaki to say, it is sad that poor people are the biggest people that will always give away their money. So it's very important that the poor will stay poor purely because of our mentality, purely because we lack the understanding that we need to go out and find information ourselves. So it's very, very important that you equip yourself with the right type of people. Have conversations. Don't make it taboo to talk about money in your families. Really, gone are those days where they say a girl who talks about money is really prude and or you talking about money is a rude thing. Please, okay? We're tired of being poor, okay? We're tired of misusing our money. We literally, every single time they talk about mismanagement of funds when it comes to government department, I sit there and I'm like, oh, I might as well be a government department because I'm also misusing my funds. So it's very important that you get yourself to the point where you can have conversations about money. You equip yourself with financial education. Stop taking up any more debt, especially if you're leaving university with a little bit of debt. Manage that debt as best as possible. Start saving as soon as possible. Maximize on compound interest. It is going to be very important for you. Mwah, mwah, mwah. Remember that you can follow my videos on financial literacy with Nicolette Mashile. I am also on Twitter at I'm Coco Mash. On Instagram, I'm Nicolette Mashile. Bye. Oh, and you can now watch me on Daily Teta every single day on SABC 1, 11 to 12 o'clock.